Good morning. Welcome back to Our Neutral Voices Presents a Financial Pillar. I'm Ryan Leopard, and joining me on the set today are my man JJ Foster, Mr. Fort Wayne.
Good morning. Hey, good to be here. Always good to be back.
Absolutely. And today we have a special guest for you, Fraud Investigations Manager with Star Financial Bank, David Greenwood.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
David, thanks for joining us today. Topic we're going to talk about today is fraud, something I know is near and dear to your heart. Right, David?
Yes.
Yeah. Talk about some consumer banking fraud trends, things that we see clients falling victim to, kind of bring some awareness around that to hopefully save from people becoming victims to. And then also talk about a little advice on what people can do to protect themselves, right? But before we get started, why don't you give us a little background on yourself, David?
Yeah. So I'm actually new to Fort Wayne. Been here for this month is 2 years. Actually was born and raised in Chicago, northwest side of the city. Would eventually become a Chicago policeman. With the Chicago Police Department, I worked for 23 years. I ended as a detective in our financial crimes unit. And then really at the end of 23 years, I retired to take those skills and my knowledge in the fraud and scam space into the banking world. And that's where that led me to Fort Wayne, Indiana, Star Financial Bank as their fraud investigations manager.
Gotcha. It's got to be a huge change for you going from investigator in Chicago to financial crimes and banking.
It's funny because I'll run into old partners that will ask me if I'm bored now, sitting behind a computer.
That's my thought. Yeah.
You know, like living the easy life, and I typically respond with, "You have no idea. I am busier than I've ever been before. The challenges are different. I'm doing a lot of the same work, but I would say, in a police department scenario, we're limited oftentimes by jurisdiction and things of that nature. So I could take a case and take it deep. But when you come into the banking environment, the corporate world, and every customer that I have, every fraud scenario, everybody's important. And so everything has to be touched. So I don't go as deep, but I go wide.
Gotcha. So I had a fraud investigation manager with a bank. What does your daily routine look like? Like, what are some of your things that you're heading up?
That's funny you should ask about routine because there are some routines in the sense of all of the technology that we have in place, alerting systems that we monitor and look at. So there's things that have to be worked. I have a team of people as well, so I manage a team. So there's certain responsibilities, but in the fraud space, it's hard to say routine, right? Because you never know when something's going to pop off if we are going through some kind of fraud event or just one individual customer is suffering a large fraud event. As a community-based bank, I mean, I take great pride in knowing our customers can get somebody on the phone and we can begin to try to mitigate whatever damage is or has been or is done, I should say.
And along those same lines, how do you stay on top of stuff? That's something I've often wondered, even with our folks that head up the fraud. I mean, there's not like a website. How do you where you get your information from? What keeps you on top of the game?
So for me personally, there's a number of resources that it's almost like even in the police world, I'd get off the job and people would ask me, hey, what do you do for fun? It's like, I sit home and watch cop shows.
Watch cops.
So
Take your job home with you.
Here I am in the fraud space, but on the way to work, I'm listening to, fraud podcasts, and listening to stories of others, but I'm also involved in network groups here in Fort Wayne, like, other fraud investigators. And so there's a lot of information sharing that happens there. So in our line of work too, I mean, any of us working in bank, we all have our compliance training and such. And, I know with my team, I'm requiring, additional specialized training for fraud as well. So I guess trying to stay up on all current trends from things I see in the news and websites, various, groups that I'm a part of, the International Fraud Examiners Group that always has various information that I can kind of stay on top of leading trends. But quite frankly, to be on top of my game, it's about just showing up to work every day because I would be very cautious of any fraud investigator who's told me they've figured it all out and they know every fraud scheme, because every single day I'm often amazed
You
at
don't
something
know
I
about it
see.
until it happens and somebody's fallen victim to it. Right?
Correct.
Somebody's created it before you know about it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, old school frauds don't disappear. Here we are in 2024 and we're still dealing with check fraud, for example, right? And it's major. In fact, I would say there's like a renaissance of it now. It's kind of been reborn. But we're really even still dealing with old school check fraud.
Gotcha. So let's talk about some consumer banking fraud trends, the bigger ones that we're seeing clients fall victim to nowadays. And let's start with probably the most basic one, debit card fraud, right?
Okay.
So I'm a client. I have some debit card fraud. I get a text alert from the bank or a call from the bank, telling me I may have had a transaction go through or didn't go through, but it was attempted on my card. Well, how did somebody get my card number?
So there's a number of ways. Starting with maybe our own personal hygiene, what do we do with our card numbers, whether it's your credit or debit card? Where have you entered that information? All of us are looking for a deal, but are we making sure that we're going to legitimate websites? And, once our information is shared, the other thing is, do we have friends and family? If we share that card, it doesn't take much for someone to add a debit card to a digital wallet, or if that information, something hits online, forget about it. Everyone has it. So there's some things we need to do to make sure that, when I say me as a personal consumer, things I do to protect my information, that's half the battle. The other half of the battle is times when your card maybe goes bad and you could lock it in a safe and somehow the debit card number still gets out there, right? And there's a number of ways that can happen. One of the big ones is we can pretty much read in the news on a daily basis about data breaches, right? So data breach information is often, even if you think it's nothing to do with banking, when you hear of a data breach with, cellular providers or the medical community, a lot of that actually is our financial information that's part of a data breach, right? So that information gets collected and will often be put for sale on the dark web. It's very easy to take, a large data set and even begin to break down what banks those cards belong to, because the first, for all of us, any of our payment cards, our first 6 or 8 numbers identify the bank, right? And that's pretty publicly known information. And then, there are things like card cracking as well. I mean, technology these days that we love and embrace is such that scammers and fraudsters have figured ways to almost like robo-dialing, using computers to basically crack cards, running a bunch of series of charges against cards. And so it's important for us to monitor our accounts.
So that's one where, I have a card. I use my credit card for everything, right? But I have a debit card, but I only use that for ATMs. How would somebody get that card number, right? And I think that's kind of where that robo dialing for card cracking comes into place, is that you're not necessarily doing anything wrong where you're trying to make a purchase at a store and somebody takes that number, or you pay it and a waitress at the restaurant takes it. Now you're wondering if she took it, right? That could be something as simple as there's just somebody somewhere that's using their computer to go through. They have access to, they know what a certain bank's card number is, and they know if it's a Visa or MasterCard, so that kind of tells them what some of the first few digits are, and then they're just kind of randomly going through with the computer system, robo-dialing, like you say, to see if this card is a good card, if they get a hit on it when they try to run or decline.
It's really yes and both, right? All those scenarios are true, right? And I guess working where I work and doing what I do, when my card goes out and the waiter or waitress disappears from my site, in the back of my head, I'm always like, man, get back with that card quick, So there's that. The key here, though, there's regulations that are in place for all banks. Monitor your account and, take advantage of online banking rather than waiting for statements, because if you're monitoring your account on a regular basis, you look for any charges that are unauthorized, report it to your bank immediately. And that's, you're not going to be held responsible for that, number one. But then number two, that actually does assist the bank in, formulating rules moving forward to, hopefully mitigate that kind of damage for someone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
First off, I'm going to say you guys are, my mother's going to watch this show and she's going to be like, see, I told you, that's why I don't do any of that stuff. I'm set up. And then secondly, I want to say, is it safer if I'm making an online purchase to use a credit card versus a debit card? Is there any difference? What would be your advice to that? Because you hear people that, say stuff like that. I don't want them to have access to my debit.
Well, your debit card is finances coming directly out of your deposit account, whereas the credit card, it's not coming out of your deposit account yet. So in one sense, there is a layer of protection from the credit card that the funds didn't come directly from your account. Right. So I think in that sense, there's some wisdom in that. And, in my personal banking, I pretty much make a lot of charges on my credit card and pay it off at the end of the month. But I mean, that's going to be a preference thing for individuals. But the thing I default to, again, is the important thing is knowing what's on that card on a pretty regular basis so that you can report anything that's unauthorized.
Yeah. So for me personally, what I operate off of, and then when I was in the retail banking environment, I used to talk to clients about all the time, is like, yeah, there's not really one safer than the other. It's just that initial sticker shock, right? If it's your debit card, that's your money coming out of your account. Now you got to wait for the bank to refund your money to get back in there. So if you need to handle things with checks, cash, things like that, are those funds going to be there and available when you need them?
Yeah,
Rather
a little more
than
wiggle
credit
room.
card. Yeah, the credit card is
a layer.
Look at it. It's the bank's money, right? Even if you have fraud, they credit it. The bill's technically not due for 30 days, 20 days, whatever the case may be. So you have a little bit more time. It's not your money out of the account that you may need to operate off of. As well with the debit card fraud. Sorry, just lost my train of thought there.
We can move on to other
Move on.
because
Move on.
debit
Yeah.
card fraud
Yeah.
is not the only
Yeah,
thing in town.
I'll come back to that one
Yep.
real quick because I want to finish up with that. But so debit card fraud, we have that there. What about the online banking fraud, right? Where we have somebody calling or sending a text message. Is this you making this transaction? Talk to us about that, like those call spoofing numbers, things like that.
Yeah, so in our world, we call it online account takeovers. So if we have online banking, one of the things we have to secure, just like our email, anything where we have a login, we want to secure our username and our password. Scammers these days have figured out ways of basically social engineering us as individuals into us providing information. Online platforms with every bank are, very secure. Probably the weakest link is us, right? And that's because scammers, gone are the days of, the Nigerian prince scam of, trying to say, hey, there's $1 million waiting for you. We just need your account information, right? Now, the scammers have gotten more crafty. Instead of using that profit motive, they'll say, hey, look, there's charges on your debit card. You may get a text message. You may get a phone call. The caller ID might have your bank's phone number and ID. Scammers have now figured out ways of compromising the National Caller ID Registry. So that's called? It's called spoofing. So you have to be concerned, even when you see your own bank calling, is somebody asking you, never give out a PIN or a code. A PIN or a code is your safety and security. Typically what's happening there is a scammer is clicking on a forgot password function, and that triggers a legitimate code sent to the phone. A scammer that's talking to you needs to get something from you, and it's typically going to be your personal information or a code. Never give out a code, even to someone claiming to be from a bank.
Mm-hmm. And that text message says, don't give out this code to anyone.
Yes,
Right.
yes. So, yeah, and
Typically they do.
yeah, and so a text message may come from your bank asking you, hey, did you spend $400 at Best Buy? Respond yes or no. You should respond no. They've got you because now you're going to get the follow-up call.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jay.
I just was going to say, to that scenario, if somebody's in that situation, please just hang up, say, hey, I'm going to call the bank. Call, and you always want to confirm with that entity that's asking you that information. So
Perfect. Thank you for that ad too, because we always talk on the show about how important it is to find a bank to comfortable with, find a banker to have a relationship with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Especially in situations like that. A banker is there to help you navigate your bank or your financial institution. So you have somebody that their number, somebody that you trust, or even if it's not your banker because it's after 5 o'clock and they're closed, have that number for the fraud department, which typically is on the back of every debit card that you have or credit card that is a trusted number.
And the key is stop, slow down. In those scenarios, the scammer's using, we have that fear of loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we got to stop this immediately. They know that and they use that. Stop, slow down. I know when I call after a fraud scenario, the typical question I'll get is, how do I know you're really from the bank? Well, A, I'm not asking for any information, but B, just I'll hang up. You can call the number on the back of your card and have the call transferred to me.
Thing I would think of there's thank you for asking that question.
I always
Right?
encourage that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to know right away if you start questioning the person on the phone or stating that, hey, I don't necessarily know who you are or that this is a legitimate call. Let me call my banker. Let me call my branch. Let me call the number on the back of my card. The person on the phone there is going to say, Absolutely. I
may
understand.
I
right?
may have told people myself, I wish you were this.
Yeah.
I wish you were this inquisitive for the last guy that just called.
Yeah, yeah, and if if that person is legitimate on the phone, they're gonna have no problem letting you off the phone, right? They understand it's gonna be the person that's pushy, like, no, it's fine, we'll take care of it here. There's no need to do that. That's the person trying to scam you. They don't want to let you off the phone. The person that's on the up and up, they're gonna be fine and understand what you're doing there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Absolutely, Terrence. I know you're retail banking environment now. What are some things that you're running into, or that you hear from clients that they're falling victim to with this stuff?
To piggyback on majority of the things that I did here, of course, with the debit card fraud, credit card fraud, especially, and also especially with the over the phone scams as well. The biggest thing that I always mention to all my clients is if you at any point in second time have a odd gut feeling, hang up the phone and call me personally. There are too many instances where someone was too afraid to call their own bank because whoever was scamming them advised them not to, where they actually missed out on their funds. That is a big issue for me personally, because we all work hard for the things that we earn, and it's not right for somebody to just come in and take those things. Just to hit back on the debit card fraud just a little bit, I always advise my clients as well to use your debit card at well-trusted places. Like if you know for a fact you see Todd at the bakery like every other Friday, you can use your debit card there. You know for a fact that if you get an awkward charge from there, you know exactly who it came from and when it happened. Shopping online, I typically always recommend a credit card. By all means, let the bank's money get tied up, not your own. If anybody here has filed a dispute before, we all know it can take quite some time. And the thing is, there's not even a guarantee that you will get your own funds back. So in a sense like that, if you're going to be shopping on websites that you are not familiar with, I always recommend using a different source of funds so that your own funds are not tied up.
Yeah.
On top of that, I mean, another thing as well, too, I know they no longer typically teach cursive in school. So a lot of people that are endorsing checks or other documents, their signatures are extremely replicatable. That is a severe issue as well too, especially when it comes to legal documents, loan closing, mortgages, things like that. Having a unique signature is going to be the thing that helps set you apart from everybody else. I've seen people print their names in areas that should be signed. Typically, I face this issue with a lot of our younger clients as well too, because they don't understand the severity of what a signature does. It's almost the equivalent of you signing your life away on paper.
Yep. A couple points that you made I want to touch on. Going back to where I lost my train of thought, what I was going to say on that, you just jogged it in my memory, is that me personally, I use a separate card for online purchases than I do anything else, even if it's a credit card, debit card. It's a credit card, but it's a different one that I use for other purchases as well. Because as David was mentioning, keeping track of your purchases is huge, right? So if I have one card, I don't buy things online a lot, right? So that's an easy one for me. I don't have to check it every day. If I go and check and there's some purchases on there, I know if I've made anything recently online. If not, it's going to stick out, rather than using the same card I use for everything else, and then all of a sudden it gets lost in all my transactions, and I may not catch it. So I personally use one card for online purchases. I have another card that I use for my day-to-day and any other things that I use. The other thing that you mentioned there is sometimes the bank, they may be able to get your money back. Sometimes they can't, right? There's regulations around some of that stuff, which we probably don't have a lot of time on this show to go into. But ultimately, a lot of times the consumers have the impression like, well, I don't really care. The bank's going to get my money back, right? Just like it's insured. It's not a loss to that, which is, you can speak to this, David, not always the case. This is a huge money loss to a bank, and banks are for-profit businesses typically, and they're not going to stay in business. Your bank that you trust, that you love, if they keep taking losses after losses after losses after losses because people are not being aware of what their mistakes are, right? Their bank's not going to be around too much longer.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. When regulations come into play, one of the big things is did you benefit? So a lot of people, you'll see, maybe you bought something online, got something for free, but it came with a subscription, right? So if things can be tracked back to you, and there's a thing called friendly fraud as well, where people think, the bank is just going to give money back. But there are good investigative tools out there to be able to see if it's a true fraud event or not. I would piggyback off of a scammer tactic that was mentioned, that of isolation. That's another one that's huge. So when it comes to isolation, a scammer's always going to tell you to not tell somebody else, right?
Exactly.
If there's one message to get out here today is, in the midst of a fraud scenario, slow it down, but then also tell somebody else, tell your trusted partner at the bank, even if it's a law enforcement call, a trusted family member, tell somebody else. I would say that would probably be a huge piece of advice in the midst of some kind of fraud event as well.
Yeah, because Terrence, you mentioned if you have that gut, sometimes the people don't have that gut. They're comfortable. That person that made them real comfortable, and everything they're saying is making sense. And next thing you know, you've been scammed. So I think the biggest thing is making sure that you stay educated, and if somebody you get that call out the blue or they're saying something, just having that mind of saying, okay, well, hold on, let me confirm.
Yeah, and a lot of times the clients that I run into that have had the issue, it's that initial lack of awareness that makes them fall victim, because usually by the end of the phone call, their antennas are up. There's something that was off about this phone call, but usually by then it's too late because you've already given them the information you're looking for. Yeah. So it's very important to act right then. Don't be like, well, I don't know, right? I'm not sure. I think there was something wrong, but then let me give it a few days to see if something happened. Don't wait to see if something happens. Act now, right? Call the bank, close down your debit card, freeze your accounts, whatever you think. Ask their advice. They're going to ask you, what information did you give out? What happened? And then they'll determine what the course of action is. Is it simple? Do we just need to close on your debit card, give you a new one? Or do we need to truly freeze all your accounts, open new accounts, and stuff like that?
Right? And I'll say this too. I mean, it's not just about the consumers. I don't want anybody to feel like we're talking down to them or you feeling foolish. All of us are in the banking industry, and we're getting emails. Our Davids of our companies, of our banks, are keeping us diligent of this stuff. I mean, they're spoofing CEOs and spoofing. They've got emails sent to us as lending agents, and have our letterhead and everything, and it'll come down to a fine line. We do simple tests out there where our compliance sends things. Either you're sending it to phishing or you're clicking on it, and it'll say, hey, you've been dinged, or you haven't, but it keeps you vigilant.
And our victims in the bank are vulnerable and elderly. Correct. But also younger, also professionals, also lawyers, doctors, you name it. In fact, I would say you're more at risk if you're in a position where you think, I can't be scammed.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things, because David and I were just part of a fraud seminar where David was talking, to clients there, and clients were sharing stories about how they were victims, things like that, which was great to see. But one of the things was, we had some, professionals in the room, namely attorneys. And I have some colleagues who have some attorneys as clients that have said, nah, I'm not interested in that. I'm an attorney. I know all this stuff. I don't need to get it. There's attorneys in the room sharing the stories of how they became victims, right? So when you think you know too much, that's probably when you might become a victim as well. You let your guard down with it. So don't have a lot of time left in the show. There's a couple topics, David, I want you to definitely touch on. What are some things the bank at your level kind of does to proactively protect its customers?
Yeah, so in a proactive way, we have systems that are set up in place, especially when it comes to things like, the checks that are flowing in and out, or your online banking. We're looking at, network traffic. We're looking at IP addresses. We're looking at devices. I don't want to sound big brother, but when you do come to a bank, that's your partner, right? And so we're looking for anomalies. We're looking for things that break patterns. And, from there, also being a community bank, we certainly have a healthy phone call system where we are, calling on alerts, checking in with our customers, making sure that, transactions are legitimate.
So you said something there. Sorry, JJ, real quick. Big brother, right? Because that is a big thing that I run into with clients a lot of times is
lack of trust. Yeah.
Well, not necessarily lack of trust, but why are you asking me all these questions? This is my money. I should be able to do what I want. You're getting too nosy with what I'm doing for it. And we really need to train our minds around that. We're not trying to dive into your business. We're asking these questions to help protect you, right? Because people come in all the time sending wires, sending money to people, and they think it's somebody they know, somebody they trust, those love scams, right? They're 100% sold that they know this person's on the up and up. We as bankers are trained to pick up on certain things and know what's going on. So when things look unusual, it's our fiduciary duty to ask these questions to help protect you and the bank. If you train your mind around the bank's here to help protect me and not they're here to jump into my business, it's going to be a lot easier for everybody. So just, change that mindset.
And that's what I was just going to hit on. I mean, like you said, you focus in on a big brother. I heard him say partner. And that's, I like consumers understand, like, we are partners, and don't take it personal. Appreciate the fact that they're calling. You went out of state or you're out the country and there might be a decline, or say, call the bank. That's because, like you said, a trend has been broken. They're being diligent in making sure that your money is safe.
This is not old school banking where it's just, trust me and
there's
you know,
there's the in general, what do you need to know this information for? But yeah, I've literally seen it in the midst of an imposter scam, a romance scam, where someone is legitimately trying to send their own money. The illegitimate part is they're being scammed. And so we, to be that partner, we care about regulations. We're highly regulated, but we also care for the customer. Like the last thing I want to see, I want to, picture my own mother in this situation. The last thing I want to see is you lose that money.
Here's
Right?
one of the things I've never understood too is why people get upset when the bank asks them for their ID, right? I have no problem if you ask me for my ID, because if you're asking me for my ID, it's because I don't know you and you don't know me, right? If you knew me, you're probably not asking for my ID. We've been in here, we've been face to face. If I don't know you and you don't ask for my ID, then I have a problem with it. Don't ever be upset with somebody from the bank that's asking for your ID. It's to help protect you. We in the banking world have seen it numerous times where people have done that, right? They're upset about that, but we've also seen the upset end where people are mad because you didn't protect my money, right? How did this happen, right? Well, there you go. Terrence shaking heads down there like,
Yeah,
it's probably a daily
goodness,
routine
yeah.
for you, right?
Yeah.
I know it was for me when I was in the retail environment. Daily
They
routine. People
are
are mad about showing their IDs.
more willing to give their account information to scammers over the phone than they are willing to give me their ID.
That's probably 100% the truth.
And I'll look at sometimes I was like, I'm the person that opened your account. You remember all the personal information that we put into the system to make your profile. Your ID is not. I don't need your ID personally.
Yeah.
You came to me to open your account because you trusted me. You wanted this to be your financial institution. When I tell you at the account opening that I am going to be your personal banker, I will call you for all your banking needs. I will call you when I notice things that are not normal.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason for you to be standoffish with me. I'm not calling you to waste your time. I'm calling you because I've noticed an abnormality in your spending.
Yeah. Last thing, because we're running short on time here again, I want you to jump into, David, is what are some things we can do to protect ourselves, right, from a credit standpoint, right?
So from a credit standpoint, the number one thing that a consumer can do to protect themselves from identity theft is to put a freeze on their personal credit with the 3 credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. This is important because the credit bureaus, they're for-profit companies, but they are somewhat regulated by the government because they basically are a monopoly. They hold all of our credit scores, right? Thing is, if someone has enough of your personal information, they can, I can become Ryan Leopard and I can, buy a house in your name, a car in your name. I can open accounts in your name. If you freeze your credit, people cannot pull the score and thus cannot get credit. It is the number one. It's not a bulletproof thing, but it's the number one thing you can do to protect your identity. The sad part is, from my law enforcement experience and even in the banking world, I notice a trend where we tell people to do this after a fraud incident. Any chance I get to tell people, we're born naked. We're not born with a freeze on our credit. We should place a freeze on our credit, even our kids, because the world's become digital. We have a digital identity. It needs to be protected. Get a freeze on your credit. You can even pull a copy of your credit report. You can do it a few times a year, but I would suggest annually to make sure that nobody else is pulling hard pulls on your credit.
And you can do that. The official government website about this talks about annualcreditreport.com. It's where you should go, trusted site to be able to pull it. I believe you can get a copy of each one of your credit bureaus, so Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, once a year for free. Now, that doesn't mean you can get your credit score for free, right? So there's a difference. You get a copy of your credit bureau, allows you to review it, see what's on there, see what inquiries are, which means, did somebody look into your credit? Did somebody pull your credit? Who is that? If you want your score, that's a different scenario. There may be a cost involved with that, but it is something you should check. And this is your kind of end of the business with the mortgage.
Yeah, but I just was going to say, we're talking about scams and frauds, and your credit report is free. When you go to pull that up, there's going to be all kind out there charging you. When you go to annual credit report, there's ones that are out there that there is a fee. So you don't want to send somebody to the wrong one, or you want to be diligent in that fact. Just pull in a free report.
And I'm going to say I'm one of those individuals there that I didn't have a freeze on my credit bureau for the longest time until we've recently started talking about this, David. And not because I didn't know it was important, but it was kind of like, well, it's never happened to me. I don't want to go through all the hassle. I didn't know where to go to do this and how easy is it to unlock it if I need to use it, all that stuff. But you got to train your mindset to think like, it's pretty simple if you understand where to go and what to do and how to manage it. But at the end of the day, if and when fraud happens to you, what hassle are you going to go through then? The hassle you have to worry about unlocking your credit bureau if you need to use it is minimal to what you're going to have to go through if you do end up experiencing fraud. Every single person I've ever met that's gone through that, it's a nightmare, right? You gentlemen can probably, it's all attest to that, right? Whether you've done it personally or clients you've run into that have had that issues, it's a nightmare. But nowadays it's pretty simple, right? You go online to the 3 credit bureaus, you can sign up for free. They do have premium packages and things like that you can sign up for that do cost, right? And they're trying to solicit you for that because they are for-profit businesses. But ultimately, when you bypass that stuff and get to where you need to be, you can put a credit, is it block or freeze?
So they have alerts and freezes. I would recommend the freeze because the alert will drop off.
Okay, so the freeze is they're actually locking your credit bureau. So if anybody at all goes out to try and pull your credit, which is the first step any bank or lending institution is going to do, they're going to pull your credit to see if you're credit worthy before they'll lend you or approve you for a loan, a credit card, anything like that. If they cannot pull your credit, they're not going to issue a loan. So by you having that freeze on there, that's going to stop anybody from out there trying to steal your identity to apply for things under your name. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So by registering for this stuff, then each one of them has a mobile app, right? Which once you have the account set up with them, it's a pretty simple to go on there and unlock and lock your credit bureau when you need to. So if you actually need to apply for something, you can sit there with JJ applying for a mortgage and you can pull it up, unlock it while he's doing it. He runs the application, you lock it right back up, and you're protected from that.
You're in control.
You're in control of everything. So that's kind of our time today. David, thank you for being with us. I know this is the topic that we could talk about all day, right? And there's a lot of awareness we want to bring to it, but that's the main thing and a starting point with it is for you listeners out there is awareness. That's the number one thing I want you to take away from this is be aware. Don't let your guard down. You see somebody calling, it says it from your bank. Understand they can spoof those numbers, right? You don't know that. Protect yourself. Tell them, thank you for the call. Let me call my banker. Let me call my bank. Call the trusted number that you know and have them look into it further. Accept responsibility for that. Manage your accounts. Look into your transactions. Keep in touch with it. And also operate under the mentality that just because you might get your money back, right, doesn't mean you should let your guards down and the bank is still taking a loss, and that affects everybody. As we know, when banks take loss, businesses take loss, where do those costs go? In some form or fashion, they got to make that up, and it's ultimately going to come back to us as consumers. So take the responsibility and be diligent and know what to look for and help protect yourself. But gentlemen, till next week, 2 weeks from now, we'll be back as well. But our Neutral Voices, peace.